Every family has a tradition that feels larger than life, and in mine, it was something called the lantern dinner. It wasn't just a meal, it was law. The last Saturday of every August, without fail, every relative showed up at my Aunt Elaine's backyard. No excuses, no absences, no questions asked. We'd dress a little nicer than usual, sit at the long wooden table strung with paper lanterns, and wait for Grandpa Leo's toast. He would always begin with the same words: to tradition, to the people who left us, and the people who join us. The lanterns themselves were the heart of the evening. According to family legend, my great-grandmother folded them by hand during the war, though a few still carried faded price tags from Target. By the time the sun set, they glowed above us like patient stars, flickering shadows across the faces of people who spent the rest of the year avoiding one another. Under those lights, grudges softened, laughter flowed, and, at least for 3 hours, we could all pretend to be whole. That was the story we told ourselves. But this year, my story was different. I pulled up to the curb 10 minutes early and couldn't bring myself to get out of the car. The house looked more like a stage than a home, and I wasn't sure I wanted to walk into the performance. My fingers tapped the glove box, where a brown envelope rested like a ticking bomb. Inside were the results of a DNA test I had taken in secret. On the top line, printed in bold black font, was a probability that turned my stomach into soap bubbles. The man who raised me might not be my biological father. I had promised myself I wouldn't look at the envelope until dessert, maybe even later. I told myself I'd survive this one last dinner before letting the truth swallow me whole. But promises made in cars are flimsy things. My hands kept twitching toward the glove box, and the weight of the secret made the warm August air feel too heavy to breathe. When I finally forced myself out of the car and walked through the gate, the backyard glowed just as it always did. Lanterns strung from tree to tree, the long table set with perfect symmetry, and the scent of basil and roast chicken drifting across the lawn. And then I noticed it: 13 place settings. Aunt Elaine hated that number, always saying, "We'll add a chair or take one away," but never 13. Yet tonight, there it was, with one setting marked by a single blue napkin while all the others were white. That place was mine. As my mother kissed me on the cheek and whispered, "Please, don't bring anything up tonight," I understood two things at once. This dinner was going to be different, and the truth I carried in my glove box was already waiting for me at the table. I slipped into my seat, the one marked by the odd blue napkin, and tried not to let my nerves show. The rest of the family buzzed around me, falling into their usual roles like actors repeating a well-rehearsed play. Uncle Ray cracked his yearly joke about hoping the chicken wasn't too foul, and Aunt Elaine swatted him with a breadstick she pretended was a baton. My sister Chloe fussed with her hair, waiting for the inevitable photo op, while Grandpa Leo tapped his glass to test if the acoustics of attention were ready for his toast. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, the evening would slide into its usual rhythm. But then my fingers brushed something stiff beneath my plate. An index card. I palmed it quickly, sliding it into my lap so no one else would notice. For words glared back at me. Run when the lights go out. No signature. No explanation. Just a warning that seemed more suited to a horror movie than a family dinner. Was this a joke? A prank pulled by one of my cousins with a twisted sense of humor? I looked around the table. Everyone seemed oblivious. My cousin Mara was fiddling with a Polaroid camera she had thrifted the week before. She caught my eye and winked. Smile later. I want a candid shock. Candid shock. The words made the hairs on my neck rise. Did she know about the note? Before I could piece it together, Grandpa Leo rose to give his toast. His voice carried the same gravity as always. To tradition, to the people who left us, and to the people joining. The side gate creaked. Every head turned. A figure slipped into the yard. At first, all I saw was a silhouette framed by the lantern glow. Tall, lean, carrying a paper bag, and wearing a grin sharp enough to cut glass. Aunt Elaine's face drained of color. "No," she whispered. "You can't be here." The figure stepped forward, tugged off his baseball cap, and the light hit his face. My chest tightened. The same jawline. The same eyes. He looked like me, like a mirror image from another life. For a long second, no one breathed. My mother's hand flew to her throat, her fingers trembling as if she could hold the past in place. The stranger's smile widened. "Hi, family," he said, his tone casual, mocking almost. "Miss me?" Gasps rippled down the table. My fork slipped from my fingers and clattered against the plate. Mara, true to her word, snapped a Polaroid, the flash exploding like lightning in the dark. And then, right on cue, the lanterns flickered. Once, twice, and in perfect sync with the warning on the note, every single one went out. The backyard plunged into darkness. My pulse thundered in my ears as chairs scraped, voices shouted, and someone knocked over a glass. In the chaos, I felt the note burning in my pocket, its words alive, demanding to be obeyed. Run when the lights go out. In the confusion, I felt a hand brush my arm, then vanish before I could grab it. The stranger's laugh, low, sharp, cut through the noise like a blade. And then, just as suddenly, the floodlight above the porch sputtered back on, flooding everything in harsh white. The intruder was gone. The only evidence he'd ever been there was the paper bag left sitting on the edge of the table. No one moved to touch it. We just stared at it, as if it might explode. Finally, Uncle Matt muttered, "What the hell was that?" But his voice cracked like he didn't really want the answer. My mother looked pale, her eyes glued to the gate where the man had disappeared. I caught the faintest shake of her head, as though she was silently begging me not to say a word. The family erupted, not with questions about the stranger, but with accusations at me. "Ryan, you came late, and then this happens?" Chloe snapped, pointing as if I'd orchestrated the blackout. "Did you set this up? Was this some kind of stunt?" My jaw tightened. "What? Of course not." But the others piled on. Aunt Elaine hissed, "You've been distant for months. Now you bring trouble to our table?" "Real men don't storm out of family dinners," my dad's voice boomed, though he wasn't even looking at me, just at the citronella bucket, as if it owed him an answer. It was surreal. A stranger had just walked in, someone who looked disturbingly like me, and somehow I was the villain. Emily, my girlfriend, chose that moment to twist the knife. She leaned toward my mother, loud enough for the table to hear. "I told you he doesn't respect tradition. He embarrassed me tonight. He embarrassed all of us." That word, embarrassed, stuck in my throat like glass. I replayed the smirk on the stranger's face, the way Mom had reacted, the note I'd found under my plate. None of it fit into the neat little script of "Ryan ruins everything." But that didn't matter. My family was already writing their version of the story, and I was the scapegoat. I tried to defend myself. "He wasn't here because of me. You all saw him, he looked like." But my words dissolved under Chloe's glare. "Don't make excuses. You humiliated Emily, and you humiliated Mom. If you cared about this family, you'd apologize." Apologize? For what? For the stranger's appearance? For the lights going out? Uncle Matt's voice rose above the noise, sharper than usual. "Tradition only works if everyone respects it. You broke something tonight, Ryan. And once it's broken, it's hard to come back." The table fell into heavy silence, his words settling over us like wet cement. Something inside me snapped. I stood up, my chair screeching across the patio. "You all want me to sit here, swallow humiliation, and call it respect? Fine, but don't expect me to keep playing the fool." And I walked away, past the paper bag no one dared to open, past the gate still swinging from the stranger's exit, past the lanterns that now looked less like light and more like hollow shells. The first breach in the tradition had been made, and deep down, I knew it wasn't just the lanterns that had gone out. It was the illusion of family itself. Walking out of that first dinner should have been liberating. Instead, it felt like setting off a firework in a crowded room and then turning my back before it exploded. By the next morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop, texts, missed calls, voicemails piling up like an avalanche. At first, I thought maybe someone would defend me, that at least one cousin or sibling. But no, the flood of messages was all about me. "You embarrassed Emily. You humiliated Mom. You stormed out and made us look like fools." The family group chat lit up with disappointment and scolding, each message heavier than the last. My sister Chloe, usually the closest thing I had to an ally, finally weighed in with, "You can't just walk out on family dinners, Ryan. Mom cried after you left. You need to apologize." Apologize. The word followed me like a mosquito buzzing in my ear. By midweek, the chat went ominously silent. In my family, silence didn't mean peace. It meant plotting. Sure enough, Friday night, my phone rang. Mom's number. "Sweetheart," she began, her voice syrupy but shaky, "we're having a little dinner this Sunday. Everyone will be there. I need you to come. I opened my mouth to argue, but she cut me off sharply. This isn't optional, Ryan. Family traditions don't survive if people walk away. Sunday arrived heavy and humid. The living room had been staged like a courtroom. Chairs arranged in a half circle, everyone stiff and cross-armed, faces tight with judgment. And at the center of it all, perched beside my mother like she was already part of the bloodline, sat Emily. Her eyes glistened with well-practiced tears, her hand resting gently on Mom's arm, as if to say, "Don't worry, I'll take care of him." Dad cleared his throat. His voice carried the weight of a verdict already decided. "Ryan, we're here because we love you. But what you did last weekend was unacceptable. You embarrassed Emily. You embarrassed us. You disrespected tradition." There it was, that word again. Tradition. Uncle Matt, the so-called peacekeeper, cleared his throat. "Maybe you owe Emily an apology, Ryan. For walking out. For breaking the flow of the evening." An apology. Again. The word was starting to taste like poison. My blood heated, but my voice stayed steady. "You want me to apologize for leaving a table where I was mocked? For refusing to sit there like a clown while everyone else pretended it was fine?" I scanned the room, daring anyone to meet my eyes. If that's what family means to you, then maybe I don't need it. For the second week in a row, I stood up. For the second week in a row, I walked out. But this time, I didn't just walk away from Emily. I walked away from the weight of a tradition that no longer felt sacred. And judging by the look on my mother's crumpled face, she knew this wasn't just a tantrum. This was a break she might never be able to tape back together. Walking out of that second dinner should have felt final. I wanted to believe I'd slammed the door, that I'd freed myself from the suffocating weight of tradition. But instead, it felt like I'd lit a fuse and walked away, leaving the bomb behind me to tick. By Monday morning, the fallout had already begun. My phone buzzed nonstop, texts dripping with anger, voicemails sharp with disappointment. "You're tearing us apart. You've lost respect for your elders. Emily deserves better." Each message chipped at me, but what hit harder was the silence. Half the family said nothing at all, which in our household was worse than shouting. Silence meant plotting. Silence meant they'd already chosen sides. The proof came that evening, when my cousin Mara sent me a blurry photo she'd taken after I left. It showed the table still full, Emily dabbing her eyes like she'd survived a tragedy, my mother leaning across to hug her. And beneath the photo, Mara had added a cutting caption. "Guess family dinners are only for real family now." That word again, real. Like I'd been demoted to a guest in my own bloodline. But Mara wasn't finished. A few minutes later, she sent a voice note, her tone hushed and urgent. "Ryan, I wasn't supposed to tell you, but they're talking about cutting you out. Not just dinners, everything. Birthdays, holidays, even the inheritance. Mom said if you can't respect tradition, you don't deserve a place at the table, or in the will." The will. The realization hit like a punch. This wasn't just about dinners anymore. This was about leverage. About money. About control. They weren't just trying to guilt me back in. They were threatening to erase me entirely. I barely had time to process it when the second blow landed. Tuesday night, my father showed up at my apartment unannounced. He didn't knock politely. He pounded until my neighbors peeked through their doors. When I opened up, he shoved past me, his fists clenched, his face flushed with rage. "You think you're bigger than this family?" he spat. "You think you can walk out, humiliate us, and still reap the benefits?" I stood my ground. "Dad, I don't care about the benefits. I care about respect, which I haven't gotten from you or anyone else." He barked out a laugh, sharp, humorless. "Respect? You don't even know the half of it. You wouldn't last a day without what this family gave you." His words tumbled out like a truth he'd been holding too long. "Why do you think we kept Emily around? Why do you think your mother bent over backwards for her? Because she knows things, Ryan. Things about you. About this family. Things that could ruin us if they got out." I froze. My chest went tight. "What are you talking about?" He clamped his jaw, realizing he'd said too much. "Forget it." He stormed toward the door, flinging one last sentence over his shoulder. "You've already broken enough. Don't make it worse." But I couldn't forget. I couldn't unhear it. The fuse wasn't ticking anymore. It had already reached the dynamite. That night, I called Mara. My voice shook with urgency. What did he mean? Emily knows things. There was silence on the other end, broken only by her sigh. Finally, she whispered, "Okay, don't tell anyone I told you." "But Emily," She found out about the DNA test. The envelope. She told your mom. She's been using it to control her. That's why they've been circling the wagons. The words hollowed me out. The envelope in my glove box. The one that confirmed, in black and white, that my dad might not be my biological father. Emily knew, and she was dangling it over the family like a blade. And for the first time, I realized the family dinners weren't the battlefield anymore. My very identity was. By Thursday, whispers turned into thunder. My phone was a war zone of half-truths and rumors. Some relatives claimed I wasn't really Dad's son. Others said I'd always been different, and now it finally made sense. Emily sat in the center of it all like a spider in her web, spinning lies and letting them travel through the family grapevine. Friday night, my cousin Eli called. Eli rarely spoke up about anything, so the tremor in his voice made my skin prickle. They're planning something, he said. Sunday dinner. They're going to confront you about the DNA test. Emily's pushing it hard. She says you've been hiding the truth. I think they want to force you to admit it. I clenched the phone tighter. How the hell does she even know? He hesitated. Then, almost apologetically, she said she found the envelope. In your glove box. So that was it. She'd gone snooping, found the one secret I hadn't even processed myself, and weaponized it. I could have stayed home, ignored the summons, let them stew in their suspicions. But I was done being painted as the villain in someone else's script. If the truth was going to come out, it would come from me. So Sunday evening, I walked into my aunt's backyard knowing it would be the last time I ever sat at that cursed table. The lanterns flickered overhead, same as always, but the air felt heavier, charged like the moments before a storm. Everyone was already seated, faces tight with expectation, like jurors waiting for the accused. At the head of the table sat my father, a glass of bourbon clutched in his hand. My mother's eyes darted everywhere but mine. And beside her, perched like she owned the chair, was Emily. She smiled sweetly, her tone dripping with false sympathy. Ryan, so glad you decided to join us. I didn't sit. I stood at the edge of the table, letting the silence stretch. Say what you need to say. Emily leaned forward. We just want the truth. Don't you think your family deserves honesty? Don't you think your father deserves to know? The way she emphasized your father made the table shift uncomfortably. Everyone knew. My mother's face crumpled, but she didn't deny it. She just stared at her lap, her hands trembling. I reached into my jacket, pulled out the envelope, and tossed it onto the table. You want truth? Fine. Here it is. The man sitting at the head of this table isn't my biological father. The test says so. 99.9% certainty. Gasps rippled around the table. My father's face went stone. He stared at me as if I'd struck him. You did this. I didn't do anything, I said, my voice steady even as my chest burned. Mom did. A long time ago. And instead of telling the truth, this family built a tradition to paper over the cracks. We've been celebrating a lie. Emily smirked, sensing her victory. So you admit it, you're not really one of them. That's when Eli, quiet, timid Eli snapped. Shut up, Emily. This isn't about you. You've been stirring this mess for weeks. Enough. The table erupted, shouts, accusations, voices overlapping. Some turned on Mom, others on me, still others on Emily. And then, cutting through the noise like a thunderclap, my father stood. His chair scraped across the patio, and his voice roared. I knew. The backyard froze. Silence fell heavy as stone. My mother went pale, her lips parting in shock. I knew. Dad repeated, softer this time. His eyes glistened. I knew from the start Ryan wasn't mine. But I raised him. I chose him. He is my son. Always has been. Always will be. And how dare any of you treat him like an outsider? The air shifted instantly. All eyes swung back to Emily, whose smirk faltered for the first time. Dad turned to her, his voice sharp as steel. You're not family. You never were. Get out of my house. Her face burned crimson. But now, the gate creaked as she stormed out, lantern lights spilling over her retreating figure. No one followed. And for the first time, I felt the ground shift in my favor. After Emily stormed out, silence clung to the backyard like smoke after a fire. For a fleeting moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, the storm had passed. But storms don't pass. They break. It started with my mother's sob. Not a polite sniffle or a restrained tear, but a deep, guttural sound that shook her shoulders. She dropped her fork and pressed trembling hands to her face. I didn't want it to come out this way, she choked. It was so long ago. One mistake. Just one night. I thought we could bury it. The words landed like stones in a pond, sending ripples through every face at the table. Chloe was the first to erupt. Bury it. You lied to Dad for 35 years. You lied to all of us. Watch your mouth, Dad barked, but his voice was raw, shaking. You don't know the whole story. Chloe wasn't backing down. What story, Dad? That Mom cheated? That Ryan isn't your blood? All these years we've been bending over backward to keep this stupid tradition alive, and the two of you sat here hiding the biggest secret of all? The table fractured instantly. Some defended Mom, some condemned her, others dragged their own grievances into the open like vultures circling fresh meat. The chaos rose like a wave, voices climbing over one another, until finally Mara, the cousin with the Polaroid camera, cut through the noise with a single, sharp question. With who? The table froze. My mother's eyes darted around, desperate for an escape, before finally landing on a face I never expected. Uncle Matt, the so-called peacekeeper. His expression drained of color, his lips parting with a soundless gasp. Chloe's jaw dropped. Oh my God, it was you. The silence shattered. Matt's hands shook as he lifted them, like a man surrendering to police lights. I was drunk. We both were. It was a long time ago. We never thought. But Dad was already on his feet. You? His voice was hoarse. My own brother? Matt's eyes filled with panic. Leo, please. But Dad lunged across the table, sending dishes crashing, and it took two uncles to hold him back. I took a breath, steadied myself, and said the words that had been clawing at my throat for weeks. Tradition died tonight. And maybe it should have died years ago. With that, I turned and walked out, for the third and final time. Behind me, the backyard erupted again in chaos, but I didn't look back. The days after the explosion felt like living in the rubble of a collapsed building. Dad cut Uncle Matt off completely. He wouldn't take his calls, wouldn't let him step foot near the house. Mom didn't fare much better. She moved into Chloe's house to give your father space, though everyone knew that was code for exile. And then came the strangest twist of all. Emily wasn't gone. I'd watched Dad banish her from the backyard, heard the slam of the side gate. But by the very next Sunday, she was back, sliding into the empty chair beside Mom, the one I used to fill. Mara sent me a picture from under the table. Emily smiling sweetly as she passed the mashed potatoes, like she'd been born into the family. The caption read, "Guess she's replacing you." At first, I thought Mara was joking. But then I started hearing Emily's version of the story echoed back at me in hushed conversations, in comments relayed through cousins. Ryan's unstable. He overreacted. Poor Emily tried so hard to keep the peace. She was turning herself into the loyal outsider who stayed when I abandoned them, painting me as the unstable black sheep who couldn't handle the weight of tradition. The terrifying part? Some of them believed her. I wanted to scream, to remind them that Emily had been the one who mocked me, the one who used the DNA test as a weapon, the one who twisted every moment until it snapped. But I didn't. By the end of the month, I had stopped expecting calls or messages from most of my family. Then, on Friday evening, I opened my mailbox and found a plain white envelope. No return address, just my name written in my mother's handwriting, sharp, almost desperate. Inside was a single note. Ryan, one last dinner. This Sunday. Everyone will be there. Please don't let it end like this. I almost laughed. The tradition had already ended. But tucked behind my mother's note was a second slip of paper, smaller, shakier handwriting. Eli's, you need to come. Emily's planning something big. If you don't show up, she wins. I couldn't stay away. Because Eli was right. If I didn't show up, Emily would get the last word. And I couldn't let her write me out of my own story. So Sunday evening, I walked toward my aunt's backyard for what I knew would be the final act of this twisted play. But the second I stepped through the gate, I knew this wasn't the same tradition. It was a coronation. The entire family was seated, stiff and silent, eyes locked on the head of the table. And there, in the seat where my father had always presided, sat Emily, like a queen on her throne. She didn't even wait for me to sit before speaking. Ryan, so glad you decided to join us. The audacity made me laugh. A sharp bark that drew gasps from the table. You're not family, Emily. You never were. Emily didn't flinch. She leaned forward, her smile curdling into something sharper. Your family seems to disagree. They want peace. They want tradition. And you, her gaze pinned me like a knife. You're the one who keeps breaking it. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope, the same DNA results she had once tried to use against me. I slapped it onto the table, the sound sharp in the still night air. No, Emily. What broke this family wasn't me. It was lies. And the fact that you think you can sit at this table proves you're just another one. Then my father rose. Slowly, deliberately. He didn't even look at me. His eyes were locked on Emily. His voice was quiet but carried like thunder. Emily, get out. Her smile faltered. What? You heard me. He straightened, his presence filling the yard. You don't get to rewrite our history. You don't get to replace my son. You're not family, and you never will be. Emily's cheeks flushed crimson. But I. Now, Dad barked. Emily shoved her chair back, her composure crumbling. She grabbed her purse, knocked over a lantern on her way out, and stormed through the side gate. The gate slammed shut behind her. Dad turned toward me, his voice rough but steady. The tradition's dead, son. Tonight proves it. And maybe that's for the best. My voice was calm, almost too calm. Then let it die. No one stopped me this time. They just watched as I walked toward the gate, my back straight, my heart strangely light. I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel shame. I felt clean. The lantern dinner was over. Forever. And for the first time in my life, I knew I hadn't lost a family. I had shed an illusion.